Hey guys, welcome back to Level Select. I believe this is level 6? Technically,
Sure.
we've had a few sub levels
Six
here
or
and there.
seven. Six or seven. I'm a six.
Six
is good.
Six is good.
Let's go with six.
Yeah.
That's a Batman reference if you didn't know that. All right, but today is not 6. It's actually our top 5 games, our personal top 5s of all time. As always, I'm joined by my best friends Kurt and Steve. We've got some pretty different variations in games here, a few different stories, and a few different perspectives on what we think would make our own top 5s and a few different reasons. We'll get into those as we always would. I'm going to start off. My number 5 pick of all time, and on my scale of games I play, because I don't play a lot, but what I play to death, was WWF No Mercy for the Nintendo 64. The diamond of my 64 gaming collection. I have Mario 64. I still have my original cartridge. But this got way more playtime than Mario 64 ever did.
I mean, there's just so much replayability in that. It holds up, you know.
You can still make current guys in this.
Oh, yeah.
can.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, custom editors are great. The AKI system, the grapple system is amazing. It's probably... I mean, we don't really have great options today, but I wouldn't mind a return to this kind of system again one day.
Yeah, it's amazing that there was a game for like early access on Steam that was using kind of like an old N64 style wrestling engine as like the base for their sort of indie wrestling game. But apart from that, I'm just shocked that no like indie developers have taken that engine, like that style of gameplay, and made their own sort of like, you know, unlicensed wrestling game.
Could be
with a
like
lot of
patented or copyrighted or something for that engine.
You can like mimic it, I feel enough.
Yeah.
And then like open it up with a big creative
WrestleMania
suite.
19 for the Nintendo GameCube had a very similar No Mercy style or feel to it. It wasn't exactly the same, but the basic light grapple, strong grapple, like tapping or holding A to grapple or do a strong grapple was very similar. So it was very easy to pick up WrestleMania 19 because it felt a lot like No Mercy.
Oh yeah.
This is the wrestling game that defined our generation and is arguably the greatest wrestling game ever released.
Yeah.
And then before that, you had WCW versus NWO World Tour. You had WCW NWO Revenge. You
WrestleMania
had
2000.
WrestleMania 2000, and then No Mercy. There were other different releases. You had like WWF Warzone, WWF Attitude. You had other games on the same system.
And the Japanese releases too. I own Virtual Pro Wrestling 1 and 2.
Yeah, same company
Same
made
engine.
all those, same engine, same everything. They were great titles, but No Mercy is just the best example of all of them.
Yeah, it's that style of gameplay kind of taken to its its peak.
Yeah.
And I mean, even go back to like WCW versus the World for PlayStation. And you mentioned Virtual Pro Wrestling. Is that the same games that were ported over as the Power Move Pro Wrestling for PlayStation?
That's actually the two Conrad Suden series.
Okay.
Virtual Pro Wrestling 1 and 2 laid the groundwork for WCW versus NWO, and then WCW NWO Revenge.
Yep.
And then they took on the WWE license, and there was only 2 versions of them. But two Conrad Suden, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those are all the basis for Power Move Pro Wrestling and some of the other games that came out.
Yeah, because Power Move there's a lot of plays kind of similar. I mean, obviously not identical, but you do see some of those fundamental gameplay mechanics in Power Move.
That was a Ukes developed game, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
But anyway, No Mercy. Probably
Best
the one game you could go back to and just keep playing and never really feel like you lost that feeling of how to control it. It's always like getting on a bike. You just realize, I can play No Mercy anytime.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing is, I think we both played that game to death. So it's kind of like been burned into our, lizard brain a little bit. Like, it's just, you got that, just instinct for those controls that it's like, you're never going to forget it. But I think it also speaks to how well designed those games are, that those controls just feel right. The buttons do what you kind of almost instinctively expect them to do, which is just, it's rare that ever happens.
We all 3 own the game. I think we should have a level select No Mercy tournament.
I think we should.
Be down. Anyway, Kurt?
Yes, because I absolutely do own a copy, because this is not going to happen very often, but my number 5 pick is also WWF No Mercy. I promise it's going to get more varied from here, but this is definitely in my top 5. It just, I pumped so much time into it as a kid. It like we mentioned, there's not much more to say about it other than it is, in my opinion, the perfect wrestling
100%.
game. You can't get any better than that.
Absolutely.
Steve?
So I will change it up a little bit, and we are going to talk about my number 5, and that is actually Phantasy Star Online. This is actually version 2 or episode 2. This came out on the Sega Dreamcast initially. was later ported over to the Nintendo GameCube, and they actually came out with Episode 1 and 2 Plus, which I actually own on the GameCube, and I chose this particular version because this is kind of where it all started. This was one of the first online experiences that I ever had, in a console with the Sega Dreamcast. The old 56K modem. Hey, Mom, I'm disconnecting the phone for the next couple of hours. Plug it in. And myself and 3 of my really good friends who actually watch, we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours in this. Actually have all of our saved characters still, all the downloaded quests. This game really just defined a generation of multiplayer games on console that was accessible to everybody. And it was the first time that I ever learned how to juggle a controller and a keyboard at the same time. Because for any of you who ever played Phantasy Star on the Dreamcast, you had to hold the controller in one hand and use the keyboard in the other to communicate. And that's probably why I can type like 100 words a minute to this day. This game just had it all. The story really wasn't there in terms of deep interactive stories as we know of today. But the story was made up by the people and the camaraderie that you had with the people that you played. And the adventures we had in this game are just endless.
So it's more of a personal, like you put in what you get out.
Yeah, it definitely, it is, it was...
Or you get out what you put in.
Either way. But this had to make my top 5. I thought long and hard about this. A game worthy of anyone's top 5. And if you haven't played it, you can still go back and play. Especially on the GameCube, which is the best version. You can still play 4-player offline and do everything you could do online. Fantastic game. Highly recommend it.
Awesome. All right. Well, we're going to my number 4 title, and it's a relatively newer title. I got 2 relatively newer titles, but they're still pinnacle games that I've had exceptional fun with. And my number 4 pick is The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild for Nintendo Switch. I'm already almost 200 hours into this game. Wow. I don't have near enough Korok seeds to represent that time because I really haven't been hunting them. I've mostly just been wandering around doing whatever the hell I want, and occasionally I'll go back and fight Ganon once I get newer stuff, gear, better weapons, just more DLC stuff that comes out. I got the motorcycle finally in the Champions Ballad. Champions Ballad was okay. I thought the base game was a little bit better.
Yeah.
But the experience I had was like none other I've had in a long time. And it was just it left its mark on me as like I'm going to remember Breath of the Wild being my first Nintendo Switch game and the Nintendo Switch being my favorite portable system ever.
Yeah. We talked about this in a video early on when we did our game leader for 2017. It's just one of those games that, much like a Phantasy Star, it's going to define a generation. I'd never had an experience quite like it before. And I think I have a feeling that's going to come up again sometime later in this video, but such a worthy addition.
Definitely. Kurt?
Yep. My next game is another N64 game, and that is GoldenEye. Absolutely one of my favorite games. I was torn. I went back and forth for a while as to whether or not I was going to have GoldenEye on here or Perfect Dark. Because Perfect Dark is kind of, the spiritual successor to this one. And in a lot of ways, I feel like Perfect Dark is, it's a lot more polished. There's a lot more varied gameplay in it. It is, I think, arguably the better game.
But
it
started.
Yeah, everything started with GoldenEye. I mean, this game, it's absolutely is one of the best first-person shooters of all time. And when I was thinking about it, when I'm booting up my N64, a lot of times I will pull out GoldenEye, play it. Perfect Dark, I don't necessarily play all the time. This is the one that I feel like I have the most nostalgia for. I never actually played the multiplayer in this too much. I played it a lot in Perfect Dark, not in this. But just going back and replaying those campaign missions over and over again, it's just
Always
so much fun. I mean, especially, when this game came out, being a really big fan of, action movies and James Bond. And this is really, one of the first licensed game that was not
garbage.
Absolute garbage.
Yeah. It's really good for the time.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. And
by Rare, they were. This had to be like, for my personal opinion, GoldenEye is probably my pinnacle Rare Studios.
It's their peak game,
yeah.
Without a doubt,
all time.
I mean, like I said, I do think Perfect Dark maybe edges it out a little bit just in terms of quality, but in terms of just my personal love for it, GoldenEye definitely takes it. It's that game that I can always play without fail and never get bored with. I'm always in the mood to play this game.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I would love to see.
Nearly made my top 5, but I had some other picks.
Yeah, they were talking for a while about potentially, because in Rare Replay they did the re-release of Perfect Dark, and that game plays surprisingly well on a Xbox 360 controller. Because, a lot of people complain about GoldenEye and how the controls don't really hold up because, the N64 controller. I think it does, but I would love to have seen a remake of this, like they did with Perfect Dark on modern hardware.
They pseudo did that with GoldenEye Reloaded.
They did with Daniel Craig.
GoldenEye Reloaded wasn't bad.
No.
But GoldenEye Reloaded missed some very key moments that the original GoldenEye and even the movie pointed out. They got some names wrong in the pronunciation that the movie made point to correct in the script when the characters were saying it. So there's just certain things in there that I feel like they were rushed. The gameplay was really good.
Yeah.
But it was a little too much. It wasn't an exact replication.
I wouldn't even knock it for that. I mean, I feel like the first couple levels, or at least at the very least just the very first level of the GoldenEye remake, did try to be like, oh, this is the first level of the N64 game, totally remade.
Yeah.
So you'd recognize areas. After a few levels, the game started to kind of go in its
They
own
modernized
direction.
it.
They modernized it. And I don't knock the game for that, because they tried to kind of remake the entire GoldenEye story as if it were a modern-day Bond movie starring Daniel Craig.
In post-2015
Yeah,
Bond.
so the tone changes, it takes on. But I felt like after the initial few levels, that remake kind of turned more into sort of a generic first-person shooter.
It got more soulless as it went on. It seemed like they tried it initially and they got it right on point those first few levels, and then they just coasted the rest of the game.
Exactly. And that's why I would love to see a proper re-release of this, but with the rights issues and whatever happened. So what we've got with Perfect Dark is probably as good as we're going to get. But absolutely.
You can always go back and play this one, though.
I can always go back, because I do play this one probably a good once a month. I will end up booting this game up, playing it just to blow up, shoot off his chairs, and they explode. That right there is the mark of a great game.
I would say this about GoldenEye is, a lot of people, when you think about first-person shooters, what defined what a first-person shooter is. Most people, at our age or older, are going to say games like Doom or Wolfenstein. It is fact that GoldenEye brought first-person shooters to mainstream. And that literally defined the direction.
It brought I'm almost sure we would not have Halo as it exists now in the multiplayer era without 4-player split screen action.
GoldenEye is single-handedly the reason why we have first-person shooters the way that we do today, hands down.
Yeah, the way that game, it just feels like everything in that game has kind of a weight to it, kind of a tactility. It felt different than any other game at the time, for first-person shooters at least. And it's absolutely perfect.
One of my favorite features, cheat codes.
Paintball mode.
It has cheat codes.
Yes.
Love those cheat codes, and that makes it so you can play it. I can play the campaign missions anytime I want with the most ridiculous cheats.
Yep.
Just turn on God mode and just walk through with golden PPKs and just annihilate everybody.
So satisfying.
It's great.
Dude,
For slappers only.
It's the only way I play it is with God mode, infinite ammo, all weapons. Just you get no love for
just rocket launcher the hell out of everyone.
There's no love for the dual clobs.
Clobs.
They're
okay.
There's
nothing better than firing a rocket up someone's head.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it just was the best.
Clobs were always like the Rambler car of that. They were they always sounded like they were about to explode.
Well, they're so terrible. I think they were actually named after some guy who was involved in the making of the game, that they named the guns after him as a joke because they were so terrible.
I could believe that.
The remote mines, though, are up there for me as best weapon ever in a first-person shooter, alongside the Cerebral Bore from Turok 2.
Oh, yeah, the Cerebral Bore. That's a good one.
Steve, number 4.
So I again thought long and hard about my selections, and when you think about platformers, a lot of people think about Mario, Banjo-Kazooie, some of those games that are legendary platformers. But one of my favorite games of all time, and actually my number 4, is the Prince of Persia: Sands of Time. This game to me created or I should say, bridged the gap between platformers and story-driven games. And this was one of the first times I ever played a game, and at the end of the game, my jaw was left on the floor with the ending and how really the story came to to unfold from start to finish. You would have thought that this game was a AAA Disney title. It was executed flawlessly across all platforms, but I actually preferred it at the time on the GameCube because I had access to the Waybird wireless controller, and it made playing this game such a breeze. Having that fantastic controller to go along with this amazing game and story. There are parts of this game that I wanted to rip my hair out.
Oh yeah.
Some of the platforming elements, but it was
jumps.
Yeah, a few of the jumps, but so incredibly rewarding. to finish the game. Utilizing the Sands of Time, the rewind feature in the game was absolutely amazing. And some of the games that, feature that slow motion or rewind time, always did it well. But this game, I
that
think,
was
did it perfectly.
when Prince of Persia finally really nailed it. Because everybody up until that point was like, yeah, we have platformers, but I suck at platformers.
Yeah.
And then you're like, wait, I can just rewind it.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe this won't suck as much now.
Yeah.
And then it opens it up to more people who may not have wanted such a pulling your hair out at every little ledge experience.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I was just about to say that I have no patience for platforming games. It's not, my cup of tea. I'm terrible at it. Sands of Time, granted, I played that on PlayStation 2, and I think I used a Game Shark to give myself infinite rewind time, but
Sure.
it that mechanic really, it did make it more accessible to a lot of people. And also I felt a little bit kind of opened up for a little bit more freedom, like to try things, like maybe I can make this jump, maybe I can't, and give you a little bit more exploration out of it.
Yeah.
Because, if you died, it wasn't like fine, you could rewind the time.
And you don't have to start all over from the level, so you can be
Right.
more...
Yeah.
You can be more... You can just try new things. You're like, well, I don't know if this is going to work, but at least if I fail, I don't have to go 20 minutes back and start all over again to get here. I can just reverse it. Oh, this ledge didn't work. Let me try that one instead.
I also love the vibe that game had when you did die, because the entire narrative of the game is that it's a story being told to somebody else.
Yeah.
So you fall, you get impaled on spikes, and you die because you don't have more times left, and the guy narrating is like, wait a minute, that didn't happen.
That's
and then
not
it
how it
kicks you back.
happened.
It's a fun little way of really...
In the voice, and
something like that.
I forget the gentleman who narrated, who actually plays the prince's voice, but his voice is just so silky smooth. I wish he could read me a bedtime story every single night. It was just so well done and so well acted. In the combat, I'm a hack and slash person. I loved it. The platforming is amazing. Unfortunately, the series didn't get better with age, although I really did enjoy the storyline for Prince of Persia 2. But Prince of Persia, Two Swords, or however you want to describe the title, because they had 3 different titles for the third one. That was really well done. But the first one really is what kickstarted it all, and I really love it.
Awesome. All right, well, my number 3 game is another action platformer, but we're going back a few years.
All right.
My number 3 pick is Super Castlevania 4.
Fantastic.
In my opinion, this is gonna... Your jimmies are about to be rustled.
The old Jimmy Russell.
This is better than Symphony of the Night. Let me tell you why. Because this is a start-to-finish, better, more whole Castlevania experience without the fluff of an RPG system added on to make it more interesting. This is traditional, left to right, start at point A, and the ending is Dracula. Just traditional Castlevania game. As good as the first one could be, this is like a more... I know they have Castlevania Chronicles on PS1, but at the time, this was like the definitive Castlevania example of classic bosses. Mode 7 was added into this. You had some really interesting rooms that would twist in 3D while you were in them. You had the new mechanic that you were able to use your whip as a can't remember. It's not a zip line, but you could attach it. You could use it as a swing.
Like a grappling hook?
Grappling hook, yeah.
Okay.
You could swing across
Indiana
different
Jones
things.
style.
Yeah. And it had different physics that were independent on. So it's rooms would twist while you're hanging from a grapple line. You're just holding onto your whip to get access to new levels and stuff. Just one of the best action platformers. And I'm always down for anything that's more of Halloween or Dracula themed. Just something more in a horror genre. So I'm this game is just perfect for me. I can load this into my SNES anytime and play this game because I love this game.
Yeah, I had never played a ton of Castlevania growing up. I would love to see them revive that franchise for the Switch.
Won't ever happen.
I mean, you would think that they would...
You mean in
doing...
a traditional light, a 2D platformer?
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
Anything, really in any sense. I mean, you think that they would maybe try to do something with that property, considering that there's the show on Netflix, which is going to be coming back at some point, which is actually a really good show. But you think they would do something to capitalize on that? At the very least, bring that to the inevitable virtual console.
Konami has said that they're looking to bring back, like Capcom, some of their previous IPs, and I gotta imagine Castlevania's on the table because Lords of Shadow did okay.
It didn't do
sales wise. It didn't do great. I like the first one. The second one kind of lost me.
I did not like the first one. The first one felt too much like Lord of the Rings. It didn't feel like Castlevania. It felt like Lord. See, that's right. The last Castlevania game that was newer that I loved was PlayStation 2 Lament of Innocence. And a lot of people hated that. but that is at its heart.
Yeah, definitely
it
not a fan favorite.
It's difficult to get around some of the platforming, but it is first and foremost a Castlevania title.
Did you play any of the 3DS ones?
I didn't. I played Mirror of Fate.
Okay.
It was okay.
Like
Not
Harmony
my.
of Dissonance or anything?
Well, those are Game Boy Advance. I played all the Game Boy Advance ones. I had Circle of the Moon,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Harmony of Dissonance, and Aria of Sorrow.
I forget.
All three were in the same like SNES era 16-bit graphics.
Okay.
Those were amazing games. The endings weren't necessarily as good, but they were more 16-bit Castlevania goodness. But
Okay.
this is just where it's at.
I mean, the way that the Switch is going, I could easily see them, cookie cuttering a Castlevania on there, and
I'd just buy Virtual Console Castlevania 4. I'm happy. I don't need.
Well, that
any
is a
game.
part. That's a part of the SNES Classic right now as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's another way to get your hands on that. I mean, you have a fantastic copy of it.
And also,
Jealous.
I have my Japanese Super Famicom edition, which has an alternate menu opening that features some blood dripping that's not in the U.S. release.
And way cooler cover art and
Oh,
way
God.
cooler cartridge.
I love this cover art. It's probably some of my favorite, like just Japanese crazy Super Nintendo art I've ever seen.
Awesome.
Kurt?
All right. Yeah, my next game is something I've touched on before in a previous video, but that is Dick Tracy
Nice.
for Sega Genesis. Again, not a game I think a ton of people played, but I'm a big nostalgia geek. We were kind of talking about that before we filmed. When I'm picking these top fives, I tend to think about games that that meant a lot to me growing up. That I feel like kind of shaped my kind of gaming career, as it were to speak. It doesn't hurt that I was a huge fan of the Dick Tracy movie. It's one of my favorite films.
That's a good move.
It is. It's a fantastic movie. But this game, I think it deserves a lot more recognition. It's an amazing game for Sega Genesis if you actually play it. I don't think it gets a lot of love. It's got a really kind of unique gameplay element.
It's like a Dynamite Duke, NAM 75 kind of feel, but instead of just having one plane where you're going, they changed it up where you can fire on left or right on your walking field as well.
Yeah,
so you
primarily.
have, 2 levels.
Primarily, you're walking in the foreground here, and you got guys coming at you there. It's a normal side scroller. It's really simple gameplay. You got color coded enemies. Each one's got their different attack and stuff like that. So it's really easy to pick up. It's a very just well tuned game. But you got your guys in the foreground coming at you. You can either shoot them or punch them out. But then you've also got that background plane where you've got other enemies showing up there. You pull out your Tommy gun, mow those guys down in the background, but you're going to have guys coming at you on 2 fronts.
Yeah.
So you're juggling, your attacks from your background plane and your foreground plane, and it just works really well. It's a really unique game, and I recommend that anybody check it out, because this game meant a lot to me growing up. I played a ton of this game.
It's just a good pick up and play game because you can instantly get right into it. It's really fun.
It just, everything about it just clicks with me. Everything about this game just feels right to me. And I played it so much, it's kind of like my go-to game whenever I was testing, emulation on the RetroPie. This is my go-to game that I always boot up because I know exactly how this is going to play because I played so much of it growing up.
That's awesome. Steve? So I'm not as much into the retro or for the nostalgia maybe as Kurt, but I definitely love his choices, and he's always got great stories behind him. My number 3 game is actually part of a series that everybody is kind of known or come to love, and that's BioShock, but in particular BioShock Infinite. A lot of people I know may instantly cringe and say, why are you not holding BioShock 1? And don't get me wrong, I love BioShock 1, and actually I love BioShock 2 as well. I think the game got a lot more flack than it deserved, but
if you really want Russell Jimmies, I don't like any of them. So
well, that's okay.
That's just
My
shots fired here.
It's hard to rustle my jimmies, but I'm going to rustle a few jimmies out there and say BioShock Infinite is the best of the series, and here's why. This was a game that really melded to the 2 experiences from 1 and 2 together. And by the way, it's Ken Levine's last game, at least as it stands right now. The guy's a genius. I loved this from the concept growing to the final product. And I do own this actually on Xbox One, part of the 10th anniversary remastered edition. It's fantastic, but I chose to bring this one because I love the cover art and everything that it has to offer. This game from start to finish, Booker DeWitt, Elizabeth, completely capture you, and the dynamic that grows between them throughout the game is unlike any other story-driven experience I've ever played, and it includes a wealth of amazing guns, fantastic gameplay, The story is incredible, and the ending just slaps you in the face. And really, really, from enthusiasts of BioShock or just sci-fi in general, or just really good games, you owe it yourself to play this game. It is deservingly in my top 3 and should be in, I believe, in everyone's. But one of those games that this is a game that again defined a generation of shooters, and unfortunately is a game that a lot of people missed out on.
I absolutely loved BioShock Infinite.
Yeah.
I never beat the first one. I did play quite a bit of it, but it's never a game that I beat. I tend to more gravitate towards really like action-heavy games and shooters and stuff like that, which, looking at my top 5, it's like looking after, I was like, wow, like 4 of my 5 games involve like shooting people in the face. But, that's why I feel like I maybe gravitate a little bit more towards Infinite, because that one is a bit more action-heavy, more traditional FPS than, the original BioShock, which was kind of a spiritual successor in a sense to System Shock. But BioShock Infinite, that game, just the vibe going into it, the whole kind of like, old school, like early 1900s, late 1800s America, feel going into it. And you're walking around Columbia at the beginning, it's like, oh my god, this is beautiful. And then that game goes from 0 to 60 real quick.
It does.
Which I'm sure you know the scene I'm talking about with throwing the baseball. That my jaw dropped in that game, had me hooked from that moment. But yeah, I definitely think it gets a lot more flack than it deserves. I think it's because, people loved, the first one because, of like the depth and,
Sure.
just the overall vibe of that game. And this one kind of, I feel like, stripped it back a little bit in favor of more traditional FPS.
I think maybe people were expecting some surprises that really, I think it was unreasonable expectations. The first one threw you for a loop. And as many of you who have played it and beat it, Would You Kindly just holds a certain level of sentiment to everyone. But again, I'm not for nostalgia. From start to finish, BioShock Infinite is just a better game. Overall executed wise, from a technical standpoint to story driven, etc. But I will say this: BioShock did for me what most games wouldn't have. And at that time that BioShock was released back in 2007, I believe, I was completely away from first-person shooters. I fell out of it. Was tired of the mundane tasks and the same old games.
That was the Modern Warfare era when like everything was just trying to be.
Well, that was actually before Modern Warfare.
Was it?
So Modern Warfare released shortly after the original BioShock. And ironically, BioShock got me back into first-person shooters, and I went on to later buy Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, which that's another story. The game was fantastic. It was an amazing game, and again reinvigorated the first-person scene, but I fell out of first-person games, and I just so happened chance before going to work one day, BioShock demo was available. I downloaded it. I remember falling out of the plane into the water and stood there for about 5 minutes until I realized that, I can actually play the game, and this is what it looks like. The graphics were mind-blowing at the time, and the story that followed was incredible, and we got 3 amazing games out of it.
And just the production value, the music in that game alone is amazing.
Just
the
unbelievable.
Weird, like,
the voice acting, the music.
Yeah, everything about it.
Well, when we're talking about stunning graphics, great music, and great gameplay, we're going to segue into my number 2 of all time, which is a game I'm still playing, and I just crossed, I believe, 200 plus, maybe 210 plus hours, is Assassin's Creed Origins.
Amazing.
I'm an Assassin's Creed mark number 1. I beat Curse of the Pharaohs on the day it came out, and I was in the top literal 0.1% of people who had completed Curse of the Pharaohs to the end on that time.
None of you guys can say that.
I hope it's dated when I got it, because I got it that day. I'm not bullshitting here. I was literally top 1%. But I'm still playing this game. This game is perfect. I love ancient Egypt. I've loved the setting of ancient Egypt since I was a kid, and I've always wanted something that's basically just this. The idea I can go around, I can go in tombs, I can loot, I can like look around at really cool stuff. Now with the Discovery Tour, I can learn more. I can just take virtual tours. I can go stand next to the pyramids and just look at the awe of the scale. Then I can go and I can just rain bloody terror across everything and just be apex predator. It's amazing. I don't have the combat loop and like the cycle and everything is perfect. I don't get bored playing this game. I have to find myself like, wow, I've been playing this game for 5 hours. Maybe I should take a break.
Yeah.
And I love it. I'm going to be playing it probably for the foreseeable future.
I just completed it a few days ago. And if you had asked me 4, 5, 6 weeks ago, I would have said, Origins is really good, but it's not quite Brotherhood, or it's not quite Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, or even Rogue. Rogue is a little bit of a better game, but what Origins does for the Assassin's Creed series, it almost reinvents the series and puts it into perspective or the limelight of what it originally should have been in. And, from start to finish, the experience from top to bottom, including the absolutely breathtaking sequence of events leading up to the ending, which is all interactive. Everything in this game has a purpose. And if you'd asked me 3 or 4 weeks ago, I would have said, it's good, but it's not great. I described it earlier, just as you just did, and it's perfect.
That's perfect.
It's
There's
absolutely
nothing
perfect.
I would change. They balance it here and there, but we've gotten 2 great expansions.
Yes.
I'm completely happy with what we've gotten. We get a wealth of new content, which is not required, but I'm glad they're still doing it.
Yes.
And it could have gone so wrong with what we got with Unity. So we don't always get the perfect Assassin's Creed game. Yeah. So there was a lot of high hopes, and they could have been dashed, but it didn't dash any dreams.
It could have been a quick cash grab too.
Yeah.
We had Syndicate came out, which Syndicate, by all respects, fantastic game, great Assassin's game. From a physical, technical standpoint, probably top 3 Assassin's Creed games that had released, and we could have got a quick cash grab and just change it with the pain of of Egypt. But it's truly its own game. It's completely different. It was a risk that the team took, and I guarantee.
I think it helped save Ubisoft.
It did, and this is the foundation for every Assassin's Creed game moving forward. I am absolutely chomping at the bit to find out where we're going next.
Yeah, as someone who's not a huge fan of kind of open world adventure games, as much with a lot of RPG elements, it's just for whatever reason just not my cup of tea. Sure. Assassin's Creed did hook me from the beginning. That game is so incredibly well done. Yeah. It takes a lot of the kind of Ubisoft tropes, like climbing the towers, and then hunting and crafting and stuff like that. It takes a lot of that, but the way it presents all that and giving you Sinu is the best drone mechanic I've ever used in a game. It does an amazing job of pointing you in the right direction to wherever you particularly want to go. So when it comes to the hunting and crafting, that always drove me nuts in Far Cry. Yeah. Could never find the animals I needed. It was more of a hassle than anything. Assassin's Creed is the first game that I found made that grind actually fun, and I actually wanted to go out and hunt and level up. I was doing that instead of doing the main missions because I was having a lot of fun. Just I need to find 1,000,000 crocodiles to kill because I want to have all these pelts, and it's for a game to do that is shocking to me because I have no patience for grinding in games. Assassin's Creed Origins made it fun.
Well, like I told this story earlier, and I think we, deservingly so, we're probably spending more time on this game than any other game, and that's fine. But I told the story earlier of Dallas had beaten the game, and I'm like, what the hell, man? What am I doing? How did he beat the game so fast? And then I come to realize that I had been playing the game. I think at the time I had 24 hours in on the game, and I realized that I hadn't done a single main story mission. I had done all side missions, but they're so well done, and they're so unlike going back to the original Assassin's Creed, which came out 10 years ago. So unlike those, they were not repetitive. They were completely unique. They're tied to the story. They're tied to the area or the region that you're in. So well done that I got lost in the game, and I finally completed it a few days ago, and I'm so glad I did.
I can only tell you the one thing I might change is I've heard the phrase "great decision, Gareth."
Yes,
about 1 billion.
But you know what? Funny
great
enough,
decision, Gareth.
But funny enough, when you go in and play like I'm playing the hidden ones right now, I kind of miss it. I don't hear it every 2 seconds.
It's there, trust me. I hear it all the time.
They might have patched it out just a little bit, but great decision, Gareth.
That's
Come on, dude.
Great decision, Gareth.
All right, so my next game is Max Payne 2, specifically the PC version. This game came out for consoles as well. I have it for Xbox, but I fell in love with it on PC. I was a huge fan of the original one. I was torn between whether or not I wanted Max Payne 2 or Max Payne 1. And Max Payne 2, I definitely feel, is maybe the better game. I feel like a lot of the gameplay elements it introduced, like the spinning reload, I like a lot of that stuff. The bullet time slows down depending on how many people you kill in a chain. It definitely improves on the first game in a lot of ways, but the first game was one of my favorite games as well. I tend to gravitate more towards the action-heavy shooters, especially stuff that's super cinematic. As a huge fan of, John Woo films and stuff like The
Yeah.
Matrix. The first Max Payne, that was a game that blew my mind.
That was
when
a
that
game
first
made
came out.
for Kurt.
That game was you could not have custom built a game for me more than Max Payne, the original one. But Max Payne 2, improves upon that all in every way. It's one of the first games. That's why I mentioned for PC because I spent a lot of time kind of modding this game. It had a lot of really cool features. You could change tons of settings in it. So I remember one of the things I used to do with this is I would mod the bullet time mechanics in the game so that whenever you killed more people, it would slow down to such an extent and that I would be moving in normal speed. All the enemies were super slow motion. It felt like you were just in the Matrix, just walking around blowing people away with a double-barrel shotgun. And then this one also introduced the a horde mode into it. I remember playing that for hours at a time and just my game would start to lag because you'd kill the enemies, their bodies would disappear, the guns they would drop would still remain, but I would play with infinite ammo, so you could never pick up the weapons. Eventually, my system would start to lag so much from the sheer amount of scattered shotguns and assault rifles that I'd have to reboot. It's I think I've beaten the horde mode for now. I would literally boot that up and play it mindlessly for 3 hours straight, just running around in slow motion shooting people. Maybe that's boring to most people, but
No.
For me, it was just a nice, just kind of stress ball kind of gameplay that I just absolutely loved.
I did play Max Payne 1 and 2 after, well, not after, but I played them around the time when I was playing Max Payne 3. For me, Max Payne 3 was the better graphics helped it, plus it just seemed a little more brutal. The kill shots were just you just shotgun a guy right in the face and you're seeing like that, and that was just beautiful art in bloody death motion. It was great.
But thinking about the original Max Payne and then Max Payne 2, we're going back to those come out in circa 2001.
I think the first one was
2002.
2001, yeah.
And I remember at that time, that was revolutionary.
Oh, yeah.
The whole stop time, way before the Matrix existed. The stop motion animation and the bullet time and stuff was revolutionary at that time. I remember ESRB played really, really heavily into the sales for that game because we had to shut a lot of people down selling the game. Comparing it to Max Payne 3, I definitely, like you were saying, Max Payne 3 is definitely the better, technically game, but
it
Max
doesn't
Payne
have the
1
same
and 2,
Yeah.
just fantastic from start to finish.
Yeah, I mean, my thing for me is, like I mentioned before, I'm a huge, nostalgia buff. So those games, were they blew me away, and they just impacted
impact
me.
stayed with you, yeah.
The impact that those games had on me was more pronounced than Max Payne 3, even though it is far and away the better game. Like the mechanics in that are so incredibly well done. Another thing for me too is I love Max Payne 3, absolutely love it, but I was always a little turned off by the move from kind of the kind of gritty like New York streets to like a sunny
Rio de Janeiro.
like a sunny Rio. I mean, you are like in the slums and stuff, but it's a totally different vibe. Yeah.
I would argue that I like the flashback scenes in New York better than the actual game.
Yeah, I would go back and replay just those levels. I would love to have another Max Payne game that takes place entirely just like that scene in the graveyard.
Do it right.
In that bar.
Max Payne 4 announced here, confirmed.
Yeah.
2018.
I would die.
I would love to see Max Payne 3 come backwards compatible on Xbox One.
Yeah.
I would play it.
I would definitely play that one.
I think it'll come.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it will.
Steve?
So for me, this game literally defined experiences, and the next two games that I have to talk about, and we'll get to number one eventually. It is a struggle. It is a struggle for me to really decide. So I almost call this number 1.5, but it is my number 2 game. It is my favorite game of all time, and I actually have the collection here to show you, the Metal Gear Solid Legacy Collection, but in particular referencing Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. In my opinion, the best game in that era, my favorite game of all time from start to finish. Also changed the way that I looked at the series. For the longest time, Snake was the forefront, the face of the series from Metal Gear Solid, from PlayStation, Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes if you played it on the GameCube, and then there was Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty. Everybody going into Metal Gear Solid 3, much like me, hated the boss, Big Boss, as he becomes a Metal Gear Solid 3.
You hated him so much. That's your name.
I
on
know.
everything
I
now.
know. That
Big
is actually
Boss.
my gamer tag now. Big Boss. This game changed the way that you thought about the series. This game put heart and soul into the character who eventually becomes Big Boss. It's just a masterpiece. Never has climbing a ladder to the background of music been so rewarding than when you play in Metal Gear Solid 3. And, the environment from, being so smart to include elements like camouflage that alter the way that you play the game.
Camouflage was unreal.
Incredible.
Because I remember seeing initial footage of it, and you're
Yeah.
like, where's Snake? And all of a sudden he just steps out. And you're like, what the hell? Like, PlayStation 2 is doing, like, great things.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, this is crazy.
And the crazy thing about this game is that you could either play the game completely with camouflage or without. You got a chance to play the game and define the way that your experience was.
It was really difficult. It was like differently
It
difficult.
was. And I actually specifically want to reference Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence, or as it became known as in this collection, it's just simply Metal Gear Solid 3. What a lot of people don't realize is that the original version of Snake Eater came out. It was a fixed camera angle, just like Metal Gear Solid 2. They re-released it, entitled it Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence, and you had complete 360, 100% control of the camera, which actually eventually defined the rest of the series with Metal Gear Solid 4 and 5.
I think I would have liked that better, because fixed camera angles and me have never been friends.
It changed the whole way the game was played. I'm a little ashamed to admit this, but when Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater came out, I did not complete the game. Part of it was because it was so difficult and the camera was so jarring to get used to. But when Subsistence came out, I played the game from start to finish. From the varied bosses in the game that have incredible unique personalities to Snake himself, from him taking on the title of Big Boss and completing the game, and the way that this game ties into the rest of the series, I absolutely fell in love with Big Boss. This game is my favorite game of all time, but it is not my number one, and I'll explain why later. But a must-have, must-play. You can play this on PlayStation 3 or Xbox 360, and they are rumored to be bringing this to Xbox One and PS4 as a part of another HD remaster. Go ahead and take my money. I'll buy it for the 82nd time. Amazing game. Love it.
All right, so we're getting down to the wire.
We're at number one.
We're at number ones. And my number one is going to be a controversial number one.
Oh,
Let's see it.
But if I had to, it's like, man, if I'm going to pick a game that I'm going to play start to finish over and over and over again, and it's going to have great music, it's going to be fun, and it's going to be something I know, that is going to be Super Mario Sunshine. Honestly,
That's a good one.
this expanded what I loved about Mario 64 in every single way. It may not have as many levels, which is a problem, but what it does have is a very refined and challenging system, but it's also kind of easy, which is not frustrating because I get frustrated a lot. So I like Flood. I like the idea of Flood. I like being able to like hover and go around some certain obstacles and the unique challenges that provides. But the game does have its own unique challenge in that some levels it'll take Flood away from you. So it's just pure Mario platforming, and those levels are some of the hardest Mario platforming levels I've ever done. Galaxy does not hold anything to them. No game has held the same level of like difficulty as the floodless regular Mario levels in this game.
Yeah.
They'll make you pull your hair out every time.
As someone who never owned a GameCube until just very, very recently when I picked one up, I unfortunately have never played Super Mario Sunshine. I think I need to change that because you always are raving about
I
it.
love me some
I
Sunshine.
hear it's coming to Switch
I
or a
hope
remaster of it, and I would be so down for that.
That would be amazing. That, or even like I could see them announcing a sequel to it.
I'd rather have a remaster than a sequel.
Yeah.
I think this game is a standalone. It's like a good game. It stands alone by itself. I would rather replay it than play another one. I'd rather have like new Mario games every time.
Yeah.
But this game is just one game that it wasn't a launch title. They launched with Luigi's Mansion, so you had to wait for a good Mario game to hit GameCube, and boy, did it ever. This game has mixed feelings nowadays, but it's fun. And that's what Mario games should be, is fun.
It is. The only problem I ever had with Mario Sunshine, which is actually the reason why I never completed it, I know, is the camera. The camera can make or break a situation in Mario Sunshine. And while the GameCube controller at the time lent itself well using the C buttons, going back and playing that game is really difficult, for someone like me who had camera issues to begin with. But I have to say, from a heart and soul of a Mario game, from originality and platforming perspective and just overall scope of a game, Sunshine stands out like no other.
It does.
And it's just a fantastic entry to the series. I pray that it comes to Switch as it's been rumored as some type of remaster on the eShop. Please give it to me.
I would buy it again and
Maybe
again.
even a 3DS version of it because they announced Luigi's Mansion remaster.
Yeah.
I would love it, and a C-Stick on a 3DS or the new 3DS would be perfect for
I'd
it.
rather have a Switch because I don't have a 3DS.
Me too, me
So-
too. Yeah, but beggars can't be choosers.
I'd rather have Luigi's Mansion on the Switch too. I mean, I don't know
That'll
why
probably
they couldn't be
happen.
on both. But anyway, Mario Sunshine is my number one top game of all time.
So worthy.
I will play it and play it and play it and play it and play it forever.
Yeah, a game that I can play and play and play for some reason. It was hard to whittle down, a number one game for me. And I revamped my list a few times, and this one was always on my top 5, but it never became number one until I started to think about what game do I play more than anything. And this surprised me when I kind of got objective about it and said, you know what, this is a game that I always end up booting up whenever I'm bored. If I'm sitting here like, I got a half an hour to play, and I'm on, my RetroPie, what do I always end up playing? And it's a game that meant a lot to me growing up. It's kind of the peak of that nostalgia that we were talking about that means so much to me. The game I used to play with my dad a lot growing up trying to beat levels. And that is Gunsmoke for the regular NES. It was originally an arcade game and they ported it to the NES. I never played the arcade version, but this
It's
is
a solid port too. I've played both versions, and the NES version is playable. It's very good.
Yeah, I loved this game so much growing up. I have so many fond memories of, like I said, playing with my dad. We never managed to beat, I believe it was the ninja in this game. He's like the 4th level maybe. Never managed to beat him. I've since played it like on RetroPie with like Game Genie codes, and I've blown through this game. But on its surface, it's simply like a kind of like a just a shoot 'em up like bullet hell.
Yeah, kind of
like
a
overhead
light shmups kind
It's
of
like a
game.
light shmup, yeah. It doesn't get quite as crazy as some of them, but has it's just like a bullet hell with kind of a
Western theme.
with a Western theme, yeah. So it's really, really simple, in essence, but something about this game has always clicked with me. It just means so much to me on a personal level. And just because it's so simple, it's one of those games I just keep coming back to over and over and over and over and over. I've played through it a few times, in the past, year, actually. Because you can beat it, if you're playing with, cheat codes, like I always do. You can beat this game in one sitting. It's not a long game. This is back from the days where, they got their replay value out as making the games hard as shit. But even after how many times I've beaten it and played it, I always end up coming back to it because it's just so simple and so fun, and it means so much to me that I gotta say this is probably my number one of all time, just for that alone.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Nice. Round it up.
So,
Steve. What do you got?
so I'll finish it up, and I think I'm gonna finish it strong. My last game, my number 2 game, or my 1.5, was Metal Gear Solid 3, and I always claim and say that is my favorite game of all time. But when it comes to the best game that I've ever played, and my number 1 game, it has to stop, start, continue, end with The Last of Us. And The Last of Us Remastered is actually the version that I'm holding here for PlayStation 4. The Last of Us is one of those games that, again, I'm heavily into single-player, story-driven experiences, which, by the way, it also has a fantastic multiplayer. But The Last of Us is one of those games where I can't quite explain to you from start to finish and everywhere in between the detail, the level of immersion, and just the amazing things that this game brings to the table. Joel and Ellie, that dynamic that develops throughout the game, especially for me being a parent, it's so captivating, and it ties into some amazing life lessons, moral lessons, journeys, just amazing things that happen in this game. The ending was definitely not what I expected, which is what made the game even better. The expansion, Left Behind, is an incredible way to wrap up a part of the story and provide some backstory to two characters that are very pivotal in this game. But everything from the gameplay, the music, everything was just perfectly timed, perfectly delivered. The action is incredible. The crafting system, I adore. The characters all have purpose, and the story. It made such an impact on me. From a technical perspective, this is the best game, in my opinion, that exists. And is one of the best games I've ever played. And hands down is my number one game of all time. It is the one time, and I don't do this often, but it's the one game and the one time that I played and beat it multiple times. I think I'm on my 5th or 6th playthrough of The Last of Us, and every single time I pick up on something new. And if you get a chance to play it on the PS3 or PS4, it's a masterpiece. But the PS4 does offer the add-on content with it, and you have the option to choose between frame rate. So you can play the game at 30 frames as it's meant to play, or play it in a much more cinematic feel, smooth feel at 60 frames, and it's just perfect. And I highly recommend anybody who owns a PlayStation product, either PS3 or PS4, play this game. You will not be disappointed. It does take some time to get into. It is not for everybody, but I swear the payoff is so incredibly rewarding.
Yeah, I never beat Last of Us, unfortunately. I got, there was a part that I can't remember exactly where it was. It was maybe like halfway through the game. It was really, really hard. I kept getting killed by one of the clickers, and I eventually drifted away from it and never came back because I had the ending spoiled for me.
Yeah, that's a shame.
Yeah, because it's a really good ending.
Yes. There's something about the game that, again, technically speaking, like, when you think about a game, you think about graphics, gameplay, lighting, music, it's just a complete package. And I remember, everybody talks about the giraffe scene in the game when you come across this series of giraffes that are roaming this post-apocalyptic city. It's very reminiscent of I Am Legend, which the movie, again, I think is a fantastic movie, but it just has so much character in the world that's full of nothing. And it's just, I don't even know how I could talk about this game all day, but I won't for the sake of time. But it is hands down it's my number one.
All right. Well, we're gonna that was our top 5, but we've got a couple honorable mentions.
Yeah.
We're gonna buzz through those real quick. We're just gonna do each one of ours. We're not gonna go through. I only have one honorable mention, and mine is Super Mario Brothers 3 for the Nintendo Entertainment System. If you lock me in a room and just threw this cartridge at me, I'm fine. I'm fine. It's a great game, great platforming, great power-ups. You got, like built-in like warp zones. You can get around different places. You can do different levels at different times. So you don't always have to play it in the same order. But it's just fun. I can play this game all the time on repeat, and I'd buy it on Switch if I could get it on Switch on Virtual Console, which it's not there yet, which it needs to be. So please, Nintendo, Virtual Console, E3 2018. Anyway. But fantastic game, can play it a bunch all the time.
If I'm not mistaken, also Nintendo's number one selling game of all time.
Probably not anymore. I mean,
no, I believe it is.
Is it still?
I think so.
I mean, Mario Odyssey's got 9 million units.
Oh yeah, I think that's sold. We'll have to crunch the numbers and find out. We'll let you guys know, but I believe that's Nintendo's number one selling game of all time.
But I love Mario 3.
If not, it should.
And it was unique because it was revealed in a movie for the first time.
The Wizard.
The Wizard. Love the movie The Wizard. And you're playing.
I love
Mario?
the Power Glove.
It's so bad. Lucas is awesome.
That's our Wizard reference.
Yep.
Yeah. So Mario 3 is my honorable mention.
Awesome.
Kurt, what are your honorable mentions?
My honorable mention, my first one is Mortal Kombat Trilogy for PlayStation. The Mortal Kombat franchise, it's my favorite fighting game. This franchise kind of defined my childhood a little bit, again, coming in with that nostalgia. But this is, in my opinion, the best Mortal Kombat game that's ever been made. I mean, I love just the reboot Mortal Kombat for PS3 and Xbox, and I love Mortal Kombat X. But this one, more than anything, to me, is absolutely perfect because it's, combines every character from all 3 games that they had made up to that point. And they all click really well. You can choose classic versions of different characters from Mortal Kombat 1 or 2 or 3, depending on, what you prefer. But I played this game a hell of a lot growing up. And yeah, I just have so many fond memories of playing like Mortal Kombat 2 at Aladdin's Castle when I was a kid, old arcade chain. But yeah, if I had to pick like one fighting game, besides No Mercy, which is a wrestling game, so it's kind of different feels. If I had to pick one fighting game that to me is like, my favorite of all time. Definitely Mortal Kombat trilogy.
What's your next one?
Probably, I don't have a physical copy of this. I have a digital for Xbox 360, but that is Saints Row 2.
Okay.
I mean, I love Grand Theft Auto, and I love Saints Row. Saints Row 2 to me is where I feel like Saints Row's level of like seriousness and humor gelled perfectly. Because that series, it started out as kind of a, a little cringy kind of GTA ripoff.
Yeah.
It took itself a little too serious. It was still, had a lot of levity to it, but it maybe took its like sort of like, gang premise, maybe just a little too seriously to, I don't know. But 2 definitely hit that perfect mixture of weirdness with sort of serious storyline elements. And just the level of customization in that, to me, is my favorite of the entire series. Because you arguably do have more customization later on in the series in 3 and 4. But you're kind of almost forced to go wacky in 3 and 4. The options they give you are kind of across the board, just a little weird. Whereas 2, you had the option, like I made the Joker, I made Chev Chelios from Crank randomly when that movie came out. I made the Punisher. There was a lot, you could change the way your character walked. And just a lot of...
It was different back in that time when we
yeah.
didn't have a lot of like deep custom character creation in games. And
Yeah.
like, wow, Saints Row is pretty deep. You've got some interesting abilities you can change. Like you can change the way you walk. Like your gait is different.
Yeah.
They had usually different voices in some of them. So
Yeah.
it was a better character creator than most regular games had.
Yeah, and I almost find that funnier, the second one funnier than 3 and 4. Because, I mean, the humor in those games gets so incredibly over the top and ridiculous. 2, to me, hit all the right notes. It just took things just far enough to be hilarious at times without going so insanely ridiculous. Like, I think in 3, you had, like, Burt Reynolds was in it.
Yeah.
To me, that was a little too over the top. In Saints Row 2, you had, like, the drug-running helicopter pilot who was dating the soccer mom who made like drug cookies, and they had like this like weird relationship. To me, that is so much funnier than any kind of weird alien stuff that 4 can throw at me.
All right, Steve.
So I'll round it up. I'll be honest with you. Like I struggled with some honorable mentions because I wanted to put like 3 or 4 games in there. One of them was Assassin's Creed Origins. I think we summed it up nicely. My first honorable mention goes to Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. I feel like we got a chance to talk a lot about that game, but I would just add this. What really made this game incredible was the journey. Getting from, the beginning of the game to the end, and the fact that so many of us were playing it at the same time, and so many of us got to the ending of the game incredibly different ways. And, sharing those stories really just brought a certain level of experience and camaraderie with that game. That at the end of the day, the journey was greater than the destination.
Oh yeah.
And it was 100%. Just amazing.
There was no greater social conversation about one video game at one time than everybody's stories about Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
Because everybody was doing something different. Everyone I knew at work was playing it differently. I'm like, where'd you get this? How'd you get there? And then I'm telling mine. They're like, how'd you get that? How'd you get there? Like, we're all like discovering new things, swapping secrets, and not since like I can remember the NES days that there was that much like school bus talk.
Yeah.
About a game.
Maybe even Link to the Past was one of the last games that we can kind of like really, or Ocarina of Time, depending on, your generation. But just
everybody who had a Switch we were all talking about. I mean, literally, that was the only big game we had to talk about. But it was. We were not complaining that was the only game we really had to play.
And it pushed you to want to be better at the game, too, because I remember when, my buddy was playing, and he told me he got this set of armor. I'd be like, oh, well, where'd you find it? Don't tell me exactly where, but in what area, because you didn't want the game to be spoiled. And when you got a chance, like I remember forever I was looking for all the mountain climbing gear, and he kept saying, do you want me to just tell you where it's at? And I said, no, I don't want to know. Give me the area. I'll find it. And it was just so rewarding. Yeah, it just really was one of those games that just I don't know if I can say enough good about it. And as a matter of fact, if you go back a few videos, that was my game of the year for 2017. My second honorable mention is a game that really again defined a generation, brought us open world games as we know it. And this happens to be actually really the best version of it available here in the States. And that's Shenmue 2. Whether you played it on Xbox, you imported it on Dreamcast, or you emulated it, or you still haven't gotten a chance to play it, This game made open world games as we know it. The reason why I picked Shenmue 2 is the technical advancements that the game made, the continuation of the story of, of really Ryu's quest to find Lan Di, going over to Hong Kong, being able to take on different jobs. The environments were so alive at the time, and going back now and playing it, you're like, the nostalgia really does do this game a bunch of favors. But what I love most about this game is that it's lived on in multiple legacies, including Shenmue 3, which will be out hopefully later this year on PS3. But you can also experience games that, maybe Shenmue was meant to be modern day, and that's through the Yakuza series, which is incredible. And there's various iterations. We're going up to Yakuza 6 now. But that game really took what Shenmue created, ran with it, and completely defined itself, not as a Shenmue clone, but, the spiritual successor to Shenmue. And it does everything better, but there is only one original. And Shenmue 1, in this case, particularly Shenmue 2, is my honorable mention.
Awesome. Well, that was a good mix of games. We had quite a plethora of different kinds of games, different systems. We'll probably do some other top fives. I think next time we're probably going to do some console-specific top fives, ranking maybe GameCube, PlayStation 1, or Xbox Original. Plenty more stuff coming. We've got some extra videos coming for the next couple weeks, so stay tuned for those. But for today, for Kurt and Steve, I thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time, guys. Later.